Chapter 16. Witness. In the history of most religions there are some dark marks, some smears on the pristine landscape of past events that, if examined closely, show the faith or belief system to be flawed, encompassing the same darkness as the human psyche often wears. From the Inquisition, to the plagues of Egypt, witch burning in America or less noble events in the myriad other faiths around the globe, all religion seems to have a common theme of hideous actions done in the name of deity. In Estolia, one might argue that it is free of any such deficiencies. But it must be recognized that Estolia, like all other faiths, is administered by flawed men who often act in a way they feel is justified, even when later historians disagree. Meredith Zakarian, History of Estolia. Randolph Smythe is dead, Theo stated. Aside from Lillian, everyone else in the room looked baffled by his statement. To Lillian it was as welcome a message as any she could imagine, though if Isaiah was not holding her, she would have crumpled to the floor at that amazing pronouncement. "Who is Randolph Smythe?" Isaiah asked predictably. She pulled away from him and turned so she could see his face. She owed him the truth. Her eyes met his as she stated, "My husband." He stepped backward and looked at her in shock. Zeke stepped forward and said, with authority, "Your soul is in her keeping, Isaiah, married or not, she came to you pure. She is also free to knit her life to yours." The king, who had remained silent throughout the entire drama, asked, "Why did you come here as Taryn Lillian?" She was terrified they would now send her away, that her actions would result in harm coming to Isaiah. She wished desperately that his arms were still around her. Randolph wanted an ornament, not a wife. "My family," her words were bitter, "sold me to him when I was 14. She looked away from the three men and her thoughts returned to the day she was participating in a car wash for the local high school. The luxury vehicle pulled into the car wash and the man inside offered a staggering sum to the teenage car washers to clean the already immaculate vehicle. Stuart, Randolph's flunky, climbed out, and within minutes he gathered the necessary information. Lillian, washing the windows in a damp bare midriff top, was oblivious to Randolph's interest. 3 days later Stuart showed up at the trailer park where she lived. The aging structure was ill-equipped to house the 7 children and 5 adults who called it home. The money Stuart offered her father, Harold Tirana, was enough to overcome any scruples he might have had at the request, to give permission for Randolph Smythe to marry his 14-year-old daughter. Her father accepted the bribe, and 2 days later, baffled and drugged into compliance, she was exchanging vows with the large blustery man who saw her and wanted to possess her. By the end of the day, she was in New York, learning what she would need to do to successfully decorate Randolph Smythe's arm. The prize virgin he might, someday, choose to possess. Like some glorified mannequin, he made sure she was dressed in the finest clothing, coiffed and polished to look exquisite. For 8 years she lived under the threat of his eventual possession. Within a few hours she learned to put on an act of docile stupidity. Stuart tutored her in every nuance of her behavior so that she did not disappoint Randolph. She was extremely intelligent and learned quickly, and he came to believe in her basic stupidity. He kept her with him always, wanting the men he dealt with to be lusting after his wife while they closed business deals worth millions. When men from some government agency bustled her into a black van, she went with them willingly, answering their questions in exacting detail. With no outlet for her mind, she had spent her time paying close attention to everything he did. Her expression was bleak when she answered the king's query, "I gave evidence against Randolph, and they gave me a new identity. They were certain he'd try to have me killed." Randolph Smythe, Theo said, was arrested. Apparently, he found it amusing that the ornamental wife who decorated his home for 8 years turned against him. He, in turn, secured his freedom by providing information that would imprison many men. He refused protective custody, and was shot and killed 12 hours after his release. His last words were, "Elaine will probably never know how deeply she affected me. The sweet purity of her spirit reformed me. You are now a very wealthy woman." Lillian knew what she wanted out of life, and it was the man looking at her with great solemnity. None of the wealth of the world matters to me. The only thing that matters is Isaiah. Theo stepped forward and rested his hand gently over her abdomen and closed his eyes briefly. When his eyes opened, he looked at his nephew and said, Isaiah Monterey Zacharian, as heir to the throne of Estolia, your burdens are great, your freedoms few. Having given your soul into the keeping of Lily Elaine Tirana, your union will be blessed with a son, born in the waning moments of this year. He looked at Zeke. Lazarus Ezekiel Zacharian, are you prepared to exercise the duties of last resort if your brother, the future king, rejects his Kaylee? Zeke's jaw clenched, a muscle jerking along his jaw. His voice was clear and sure as he said, I am prepared to fulfill my role as last resort if my brother, the future king, chooses to reject his Kaylee. Isaiah looked into Lillian's eyes. She possessed his soul. No man could understand what that felt like until it took place. He never felt the burden of his role or religion, as he did in that moment. Having consummated their union, abdication was not enough. If he could not accept her, his brother would be forced into the one act of barbarism that was part of the religion. Only twice, in 88 generations, was the last resort called on to exercise his duty. If Isaiah rejected this woman who kept secrets, who believed herself married to another when she gave herself to him, then his brother would be forced to take first her life, and the son she was conceiving, and then Isaiah's. His eyes locked onto hers, and he felt the weight of this decision. He wouldn't be able to choose her merely to spare her life, nor to spare his own. He couldn't choose her just because she kept not only his soul but his heart as well. He couldn't even choose her to spare his brother the most heinous of duties. He had to choose based on what was right for Estolia. His brother was gripping the ceremonial dagger strapped to the inner surface of the sash of office. The only way Isaiah could accept this woman was if it was right for his nation, for his lineage, and for himself. The sordid tale of her life made him doubt her suitability as queen. His decision felt inevitable and he closed his eyes. He took a deep breath and prepared to make the most difficult, and the final decision of his life. His uncle's soft voice stopped him. Consider the blessing. Isaiah closed his mouth and opened his eyes. Zeke's hands were clasped and his uncle, in this moment never truer as keeper of the soul of Estolia, was urging his memory to take in the words of the blessing he heard shortly before the sun set on Estolia only hours ago. The blessing his brother proclaimed was inspired by deity. He recalled the critical part of the blessing.
This worthy daughter of Estolia will be remembered among the greatest of all our queens. The blessings of deity upon her and her posterity are as bright as the aura that confirms each Kaylee, as bright as her fiery hair. She will try the faith of many in the crucible of their inner convictions and strengthen their faith through that trial by fire. Deity commands that all who hear or read this blessing remember, above other considerations, that this daughter of Estolia is worthy of this future. She is worthy of the soul that will come into her keeping.
There was more to the blessing, but the part he needed to remember came back to him. The three words kept echoing round in his head. She is worthy, he reiterated, pulling her up tight against his body. He now understood why married couples frequently touched. His body yearned after his soul, but he could only have it when they were in contact and in accord. He would never be complete so long as he was separate from this woman. They would be together until time and age pulled one to the grave, swiftly followed by the other. Having made his choice, he remembered his brother's blessing. It was as powerful as Lillian's, proclaiming him to be one who, as keeper, would have visions of equivalent power to those received by Zacharias. If Isaiah had demanded that Zeke exercise his role as last resort, and become the new heir apparent, that would have nullified the blessing he received less than 6 hours ago. He closed his eyes and soaked up the warmth and presence of the woman who now kept his soul, and thanked deity for the blessings given with such abundance to the sons of Zacharias.